All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to the April edition of Science Sundays at The Ohio State University. This series is organized by the College of Arts and Sciences. I'm John Beacom, I'm chair of the Science Sundays Committee. There are about 8 members of the committee from all over the arts and sciences. And what we're trying to do is take what we're doing in our scientific and related research and bring it here and share it with the public in the same way that we share it with our students in our teaching. We're grateful for your interest and we appreciate you coming today. So today's speaker is Karthik Patanjali from the New York Times. He's a special projects editor. Yeah, there we go. He's been there about 10 years. He has not one, but 2 master's degrees. One in industrial engineering. Industrial design. And the other one in something that I didn't understand, but basically the school, he'll tell you more in a minute, the school is called the School of the Recently Possible.
I mean, it's
something
ITP,
like that.
NYU.
So something is, over my head. And we're able to welcome Karthik here today because of the help of one of our committee members, Professor Matt Lewis from the Advanced Computing Center for the Arts and Design, who knew Karthik and was able to invite him. So this is the last Science Sundays of this academic year. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming to these and to welcome you to join us afterwards for a coffee and a cookie. And then later in the summer, we may send a survey to hear more about your thoughts about the series. We did that last year. We got lots of great ideas from people. So without further ado, let's welcome Karthik.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you so much, Matt. Thanks for having me. It's really exciting. First time in Ohio, so yeah, excited for that too. So I am Karthik Patanjali. I'm a special projects editor at the New York Times. So I focus on shaping how journalistic stories are told using new and upcoming technologies. That includes AR and VR initially, but also it kind of expanded into applications of news storytelling and using 3D on the web and how you apply AI and machine learning for news gathering purposes. So at the Times, I'm a part of the graphics desk, which you might have already seen a lot of charts and maps and everything. And so our goal is to simplify complex information and make it really clear and simple and concise for our readers, all in the timeline of making it really newsworthy. So I'm going to structure this talk through some stories that we worked on and some behind the scenes of it, and also what we learned along the way. So yeah, just to explain a little bit about what you were saying earlier, I did an industrial design master's, and that introduced me to 3D, and I combined that with technology and programming at NYU. So, okay. So this is a question that we think about all the time. What's the right tech for this story, and what's the right story for this tech? And though this is the question that we ask, we basically had success in approaching it in either direction, but story always comes first. And my first couple of years at Times, this kind of was simplified because we were mostly working on augmented reality storytelling on the phone. So it made a problem a little bit more easier because there were more constraints. So I know this is a technical audience, but just a little AR refresher as to what kind of AR we worked on. This basically mostly worked on phone-based AR. It's similar to the face filters that you see on Instagram, but imagine using the rear camera and projecting the information onto the world. The face filters projects information or things on your face. This projects it onto the world or in your space. And this opens up a lot of storytelling possibilities because it can explain scale and size and everything that a web interface cannot. So yeah, we started our AR storytelling in 2018, seems like a long time ago, with Winter Olympics. And we did everything from breaking news to investigative journalism, and also volumetric video and data visualization. So I'll talk about like how our AR approach kind of evolved in literally a few months after doing a few pieces. And also, just like stop me if you have any questions. We can do questions later, but also if you have, yeah, okay. So yeah, this is literally the first AR story that we worked on. So what we do is we usually feature 3 or 4 like best athletes from different disciplines and explain why they're so good at what they do. And here, what you see is Nathan Chen. He's called the Quad King. And this basically explains how he's able to do that, like his body posture. This is J.R. Chelsky, and it's explaining, how he's able to take the angle and everything. And so I can talk a little bit more about the design philosophy behind this, but we can go ahead with this. So the point here is like we used iPad-based scanning because this had to be done really quickly. So that's me working with J.R. Chelsky on the left and Anna Gasser, the Olympic snowboarder, on the right. And we had to scan them in like really weird poses. And I had like 20 minutes to do this. It was like nerve-wracking between their practice sessions. But it required a lot of production. It took a long time to do this. And and 3D production, as many of you may know, it takes a long time to get it precisely. So this, again, is another piece that we did. We had access through a Brooklyn Museum's show, which basically showed David Bowie's really crazy costumes. And we wanted to give an opportunity to our readers to experience this in their space, as though you could like walk right up to it. So again, here we used industrial 3D scanners. And again, this was a lot of production and took a really, really long time to produce. So yes, we had like a lot of interest in doing something like this, but we really, what we learned from this is some of the things that, one thing is production is extremely difficult, especially when it comes to 3D, but we wanted to find the kind of stories that work only in a medium. For example, what can only be done in AR that you couldn't really do on the web, and what it's good for. I mean, there's no point in doing the same thing on the web and AR. So we were thinking of this, and I'll give you a little bit of a background of this story. This happened, I think, 7 years ago, and it was initially thought of as a very tragic thing where a few schoolboys got stuck inside the cave, and flooding happened, and people were fearing the worst, that they may not be rescued. And miraculously, they rescued it, and it was a crazy mission. They had to go through these really small crevices to be able to do that. And we wanted to capture like the claustrophobia and the fact that it's a crazy thing, and the holes that they had to kind of go through were really small. So what we did was we did the cross-section and evaluated the size of these different openings and projected them onto your space. So you can, this is not something that you could have done on the web. AR gives you the possibility to show scale really quickly. And the point here is production is so simple. It took me like an afternoon to do this. But this story could have been done in AR, and this was the only way like we could have used this in a way in which it can only be done in AR. Again, really simple, but it used the medium the right way. So this is something that we did in 2019. This was a piece we worked on with our visual investigations team. after a chemical weapons attack happened in Syria. And we used the video footage that was mostly used for propaganda by the regime to disprove their own theory. And this eventually won an Emmy. And so what we did was the AR component of this lets you see that site of the bomb drop and show like why this had to have been dropped from the helicopter, and the only people who had access to that airspace was the regime itself. So yeah, we were able to, it's a visual investigation that kind of proved that. Again, simplicity. As many of you know, PM2.5 is like a particulate matter that's less than 2.5 micrometers in diameter, and owing to the size, they can wreak havoc to, it can get into the bloodstream, and this causes millions of deaths around the world. And we wanted to make these invisible particles visible. And this allows readers to visualize some of the worst air situations in different parts of the world and compare it to their own city. And every particle you see here is 1 microgram of PM2.5 in the air. And to ensure accuracy, we spoke with different experts. And so this is literally like this makes the invisible visible. Like it projects what your poorest day of PM2.5 is to some of the worst in the world, like Delhi and China. Any questions so far? Or do we do it later? Okay, all right. So now we saw mostly augmented reality stories, and the learning there is like, try to find things that only work in that medium, and that kind of leads to simplicity as well. But at this point of time, my role kind of expanded to look at other technical approaches as well. And I'm going to include a lot of science subjects that hopefully you'll appreciate. So, okay, so we've seen all these pictures over 50 years. And so if you want to follow this along on your phone, but I'll show it on video also. But this is, you can see the piece as I talk about it. I'll give you like a few seconds. But we've seen these pictures, I mean, for so many years, and we know what those pictures are. But we wanted to see, based on some of the approaches, technical approaches that we've done with these investigations and photo matching, if we can contextualize this in a different way. I'm gonna move on, but I'm gonna show the video as well. So how can we tell the story from 50 years ago? This was done for the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. So how can we tell the story in a different way, in a way in which we've not done before? So Jonathan Coram is our science graphics editor. He sifted through these old photos, and he added these panoramas and added a time component to it. And it started looking interesting. And we were thinking, if we can take this to the next level and add a space component as well. So we found this really old like locations of each photos. We used this as a starting point, and it took us through this crazy rabbit hole of writing scripts to be able to estimate every position, almost all photos on the moon to pinpoint accuracy. And what that led to was, this was the program that we used, Rhino, to basically be able to arrange this with scripting. And that work resulted in these panoramas first, but with Jonathan's panoramas, there was nothing that was written. The narrative moved forward purely by the transcripts, and this contextualized where these photos were taken on the moon and what was said during that. And finally, they combined together to give you what that moment looked like on the surface of the moon. So yeah, these are the photos we've seen, but this contextualizes where it was on the moon and what was said during these moments. first step. And again, near the lander, stitches together and shows what that scene looked like. Because they took panoramas and we kind of put that together as well. So yeah, we also worked with the mill, and we had this big event in New York for the 50th anniversary where there was a dramatic reading of transcripts that Samuel L. Jackson did. Michael Collins was there, and the readers and the attendees had the opportunity to stand where Buzz and both of them stood, and then take these iconic pictures with the Hasselblad in VR. And Jonathan put this together for a special section where you could see it on the paper as well. So switching gears, I mean, internally, I kind of call this, it's been 5 years, so I can call it now. We call this the COVID particle trilogy that we worked on. So the background here is we were going through this together, and we wanted to understand it as much as everyone else. So this was one of the few occasions where we were the subjects and the reporters of this event. And with misinformation spreading as quickly as the virus itself, we saw an urgent need to illustrate really complicated scientific concepts in a really clear and concise way. And airborne particles that move through space was a perfect candidate for 3D visualizations. So we worked really closely with scientists, and you can see that it started off with using some of the research that other people have done to visualize it so that it's clear. But moving forward, we kind of worked with a few people to make our own simulations based on reporting. So let's start with this. This was a piece that we published in April 2020. This explained the possibility that this could be airborne. It was based on influenza research from Kyoto Institute of Technology. We used their simulation data to basically illustrate that possibility. When they were talking about 3 feet and 6 feet, we kind of explained that it could be more than this. It could be airborne at that point. And so the last part of it was, there was this 6 feet rule that they just introduced. So we built this augmented reality tool that projects a 6 feet circle around us, and we took it for our reporting purposes if we're able to actually maintain that distance. So this was useful to us for reporting. We thought we'll ship it along with the piece so anyone can use it. So at the end of the article that I was showing, there was this augmented reality component that lets you project 3 feet and 6 feet circles as you walk around, just to test out if it's actually possible to distance. Yeah, again, this was also adapted in the paper. And this was the second piece that we worked on, actually 10 months into the pandemic, and there was still confusion around whether masks work or not. And this project basically allowed the readers to see the protection that masks provide. This started out as a little conversation between me and my colleague, because I was fascinated by the fact that I always thought masks worked as a sieve where larger particles get caught and smaller particles are let through. But it was so much more complex than that. There was electrostatic forces involved, and that got me really curious. And I was just talking to other people, and they were like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And we're like, maybe this should be a piece that people should know. So again, we started more research on it. We talked to experts, and we projected this as a journey along with particles of different sizes. And it basically told you larger particles get caught, but there's also in the case of N95 masks, there's electrostatic charges that kind of pull particles smaller also And yeah, this was more of a scientific illustration than a simulation. Yeah, this also had like a paper component. Okay, so this was kind of a culmination of some of the things that we've been working on. This was March 2021 when New York was considering reopening schools, and there was still a lot of confusion around what should be done to keep children safe. So what we did was we got access to Bronx public school, and we were able to measure one particular classroom that kind of was similar to some of the other ones. So we used that prototype, and we worked with an engineering agency to, yeah, you can, if you want, you can scan and kind of see this also. So yeah, we gained access to a Harlem classroom to precisely measure and do a 3D model of the space. And we worked with the engineering firm to show how air would move around the room under different scenarios and how infectious aerosols could move around based on if somebody was sick. And what would different interventions like keeping the door open or having air filters would have on that concentration. So, yeah. So this talks about, again, a general airflow. And then as you move ahead, if there's one person who's infected, and if there's a window that's open, if we use a fan, what would happen? And yeah, the different layers. And this was actually really satisfying because like people called from different countries saying this was very useful to us, and we didn't know that like just opening a window would have such a big effect without, because like budgets are so tight in schooling that, yeah. And this had an AR filter that let you use your phone as almost like a device that you could check the, oh, this is in French, sorry. But yeah, you can basically check the intensity at different points in the classroom. You can literally walk around and use that as like a Geiger counter thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about behind the scenes, mostly because of the fact that, yes, we're simplifying complex information, but simplifying from a technical perspective also causes visual clarity and simplification. So the data that we originally had when we worked with scientists was more than 180 million points. And this, you must be familiar with ParaView and simulation softwares. So this was like raw data was 25 GB, and you couldn't really visualize this or show anything clear for a general audience from that. So like the wizards in our team basically found a way to simplify it with, yeah, creating stream traders, because they kind of realized that the flow is pretty stable, and also the texture, the data was basically encoded in the VRAM, so it can work really quickly. And finally, that 25 GB became 2.2 MB with the same thing that we wanted to display. And this actually made the front page both top and bottom fold. So again, this used Houdini, and this is a piece that this happened I think 3 years ago when Dixie Fire grew so big that it created its own weather pattern, and we wanted to explain how that happened. So yeah, the piece basically talks about where it started and how this essentially forms, and it grew to such a big extent that like it was creating these lightning, and it went over the like where airplanes fly. So this was like a visual scientific simulation. This was based on the trick here, the technical challenge here is this net CDF data that kind of gives you 3D by horizontal swipes to be able to like create it in a way in which it can be ingested into Houdini was something our team did a phenomenal job of, and still being scientifically accurate. So yeah, this again is an example of a culmination of a lot of things that we saw here and the lessons that we learned from working with these simulations. And yeah, this not enough time to explain what like the whole thing is, but yeah, this was the deadliest fire since 1990. And the key here is to explain that the fire didn't actually kill, but the smoke did. So again, we worked with Worcester Polytechnic to be able to simulate how this acted as a funnel. And you'll see the simulation right now of how the smoke spread. Yeah. And yeah, this used a lot of techniques that we had done earlier, where it's 3D reconstruction, but also like particle simulation, working with scientists very closely. And the augmented reality component here is it used your phone's LiDAR to be able to, it was an Instagram filter that used the depth sensor or the LiDAR in most iPhones to demonstrate how quickly smoke can affect visibility. So it sensed the depth and projected a smoke onto your own space. And you could basically look, even things that are pretty close to you becomes like, it's really disorienting. This was a piece that explained the acoustics of the Notre Dame. And again, very different from the previous one. So the thing that we wanted to explain was when you hear something, it's not the sound in isolation, but the space itself. And this, we worked closely with Sorbonne University, and they were responsible for restoring the acoustics of the cathedral to how exactly it was. So you could like swipe up and down to see like that single sound and how it changes when the space changes. And so we had to create like a custom player for this, and use the impulse response and anechoic audio and mix them together live on the browser to be able to give this effect. And here also, like though this was pre-rendered, based on where the camera is pointing, if you wear headphones, it'll accurately render it. It used ambisonic audio, but yeah, it rendered it in a way in which you could see it on the web without needing VR devices for it. Okay, so we're 30 minutes and we're going to talk about AI. So we've thought of AI as, I don't want to speak for everyone, but like we thought of very specific purposes of machine learning for certain visual tasks that you'll see the theme here. So this was a piece that our colleagues published for the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre. So we had these hand-drawn tax maps, Sanborn tax maps, that had the outlines of the neighborhood that was destroyed, and also the handwritten markings of floor heights. So this was stitched together, and Ling Dong was one of our colleagues, wrote this really crazy script to be able to trace the outlines and read the floor heights to be able to extract 3D data of the whole neighborhood, which was the basis of some of the things that you see in this piece. Okay. Again, all of this is like, these are technically like breaking news timeline pieces where we wanted to get an explainer out quickly. And this is a piece that explained how this goal was, in this case, Leroy Sané's, how he saw the passing lane and was able to kind of find that spot. So we used a program to be able to extract 3D data out of 2D images and create that moment of immersion where it pauses and kind of lets you understand what was going on there. We used a similar technique for Super Bowl as well. All of this was from the final whistle, the final end of game to publish is a few hours. This is some of the tools that was built so that we could match the 3D to 2D so we can transition between the two. Oh. Yeah, this was, again, behind the scenes. So let's, if you want to scan this, you can. This is the latest thing that we did that used machine learning. This was for the 100-meter race. Since it happened so quickly, we wanted a way for the reader to take control of time and understand it the way, to basically slow everything down. So this was published, I think, 3 to 4 hours after the race was finished. This happened to be so important because this was such a close photo finish that you couldn't really say what happened. But the data where we compared the relative speeds, and it showed that Noah Lyles just zoomed past with the acceleration he was little dead last at 40 meters, but the data basically, it showed bright red for him after 40-meter mark. So he slowed down the least better than everyone else, which was showed by this data. So for this was like months of machine learning pipeline work to be able to extract. So we had our team shooting there, like 3 or 4 folks from our team shooting at location, quickly sending photos to us. We had set up this pipeline to be able to read body positions and specifically the nose positions of every athlete for every moment, because we had to straighten this out so that pixels would amount to distance, and then we have timestamps from the GPS data of the photos, so we were able to extract speeds from that. And this is the reprojected one. Finally, it was on print as well. So it was a lot of work for that 10 seconds. That's it. This is us testing out AR stuff in the middle of the newsroom, by the way. And yeah, that's it. Questions?
Thanks very much. Yeah. Okay, so we definitely have time for questions today. And this microphone seems a little loud. There we go. Yeah, go ahead.
So you had a team of 4 on the ground for that story.
Yeah.
How many people did you have, at home or in the office extrapolating that data?
6 to 8.
Can you repeat the questions, please?
Yeah, so how many people were totally working on that? So 4 were working on ground from Paris, and then 8 people working from here. But I mean, it's a phase because during the event, there's a lot more people, but there's a lot of background work that needs to be done. So what we did was we took footage from previous Olympics, and we basically did a lot of dry runs to be able to simulate this. If this happens, what would be the scenario? Yeah.
Ma'am, go ahead.
On the Apollo 11, what did you do, like if you were knowing where these pictures, where that you would have what you couldn't see in places, right? If you just still pictures, how did you go around where?
So for the question was, how did you do the things like the simulation? Yeah. So I mean, we used the ones that we had good confidence of. So there's like 3D data of the surface itself. That was the base of it, and then we have really good details of the lander itself and the suit that they used. So that was the what we call the canvas that we used. And then the other photos were like, you could like precisely calculate the angle, and we used the word frustum so many times in this project that it like where it's exactly looking. So the things that you see are the things that we're very confident of. And you'll see it in the piece also. It like very precisely matches based on what you see in that piece.
Could you put that one for Apollo 15 up?
Sure. Yeah.
So that like the astronaut there is simulated, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that's what you meant. And then the picture when he gets to the bottom, that's real.
So was that an actual speed or was that quicker?
Oh, it's quicker. It's basically you control the speed. Like it's you can scroll. I'm scrolling and then I captured it. So yeah.
Okay, good. Just like next one, yeah.
How can you talk more about the decision-making process? Like, how do you decide, like, oh, this is a story that deserves this type of treatment, and
The question was, how do you decide the ambition of the project? So it's basically news judgment, and sometimes some of these are called enterprise pieces where we know that we're going to, for example, Apollo 11, we know that we're doing that for the 50th anniversary, and there'll be a lot of interest. So we worked on that for a few months, whereas we do work on breaking news pieces, and that's like it's shorter timeline, and it's like 2 or 3 days turnaround, and sometimes a few hours. So I mean, to give an example, the more recent one that we worked on regarding the DC plane crash, we did this thing basically to explain what the helicopter saw in the moments leading up to the crash. So we used flight data, and that was a quick turnaround thing. It didn't have animations, but it basically put you in that spot and placed the embraer on where it was. So yeah, it's both news judgment and also like how much interest is going to be.
Okay, maybe you can turn the page. This one's moving pretty fast. How about the guy over there with the beard?
My question, and so just kind of the planning that goes into how do I tell this story visually, or something like that weather piece that you showed with the Dixie Fire, or the cathedral. What does the process look like to kind of imagine before you're actually creating graphic trends and stuff, uh, how am I gonna like convey this story visually?
The question is, how do we plan for it, and how do we, yeah. So Dixie Fire specifically, there's a lot of prototyping that we do ahead of time. And we know that this is the kind, that was the first time we used Houdini for a simulation. So we did a lot of tests around, like, very, very specifically, what we're trying to do here is, like, we wanted to show visually that this comes from data and it's not like a visual simulation purely for aesthetic purposes. So we had to kind of find out that perfect balance between, hey, this is a really beautiful cloud versus does it look like data? So yeah, playing around a lot to find out that, like, fine tuning, because like that's basically the crux of our work. But to answer your question, it's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of design prototyping. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am, go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about the challenge of having the projects present both on phone, laptop, and in print?
Yes. The question is, how do you optimize for phone, laptop, and print? So, I mean, that's a great question, and majority of our readers are on the phone, so we work phone first, and then adapt it to different ones. So yeah, like you saw, these, again, a little bit of a background is we are from the graphics department, and we think of this as a visual story at the outset. And it's like we do our reporting with the idea that this is going to be a visual story. So everything is optimized for the visual presentation, including like how it's going to look on the phone, and then it's adapted to different video. Like a few years back, it was like always work on desktop because that's where you work on, and then adapt it to phones. But most of our readers are on the phone, so it makes sense to be phone first.
Sir?
To that point, do you use some sort of like browser sniff or dynamic ability to sense the power of someone's phone, to be able to know like what you can deliver?
I mean, we had done optimization like that for 3D, but not really for everything. But I wouldn't know too much into how we optimize for the rest of the website. I'm specifically talking about some of the pieces that we've done. Mostly, basically, like if it's phone, we probably send like a lighter version of the 3D model, whereas for the web, it's more.
Miss, go ahead.
Do you use AI to analyze all of the raw data for your AR simulations?
I mean, we've not used AI for
Can you
any of
repeat?
the AR ones.
Can you repeat the
Oh,
question?
yeah. Do you use AI for AR simulations? No, we've not used AI for AR simulations. Plus, that was mostly done like 7 years ago, and AI wasn't at this state 7 years ago.
Ma'am, go ahead.
Artificial intelligence into augmented reality.
So we've not done that. So how do you integrate artificial intelligence into augmented reality? We've not done that because, like I said, it was done 7 years ago, and AI wasn't at this, like it's not where it is right now.
It sounds like people want it.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
So, at least from my anecdotal observation, you do this a lot more than most other newspapers. With that in mind, do you rely a lot like on off-the-shelf techniques and technologies, or do you have to develop these as you go?
That's a great question. The question is, do you use off-the-shelf technologies, or do we develop? We do develop a lot of things. So most of the 3D stuff that you see, the browser-based 3D stuff, we have like a WYSIWYG editor that basically you can do all of this on the web itself. And yeah, there's a lot of tooling that's done to be able to do this. And we're so particular about how we want to tell the story that off the shelf, most of the time, doesn't work for us.
Okay, let's go to the absolute far back row. Yeah.
You say coding and writing scripts, and I'm a student, so what kind of programming languages are you using and for what kind of script?
So the question is, what kind of programming languages, what kind of scripts? We've literally used everything. And so it's a large team and people have different skill sets. So we've used Python, we've used like scripting inside 3D modeling softwares, visual scripting using Grasshopper. The Apollo 11 was mostly Grasshopper visual scripting. Yeah.
I think you're saying that somebody, maybe a journalism student, became a journalism student because they didn't want to learn one programming language. And now you're saying they have to learn all of them?
Yeah, and this is like such a small space that you kind of need to pick things up on the fly. And yeah, if you have a good baseline of one programming language and if you're able to adapt it to others. I mean, I'm again specifically talking about this very niche thing that we've been doing. So
yeah,
I wouldn't generalize.
Pick one of you.
Let's follow up on that a little bit, just real quickly. With respect to the other news outlets and the resources required to do this, right, are quite high. I'm wondering what the Times and has made the calculation in terms of the competitive advantage. If this gives the Times a competitive advantage, what's the future? Like, how much more investment are they going to try to do AI and AR? Where's the competitive advantage?
I mean, the question is about Times' investment in all of this. Again, I cannot speak for the whole company, but some of the stuff that we've been doing, our like leaders have been really, really kind to let us do all of this. This is pretty ambitious stuff, and it takes a big team, so they're happy to invest in all of this. And I'm glad that they see like the output and all of this. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, let's go to the same row. Can we raise the house lights just a little bit so that we're not so blinded up here? Thanks.
For the Syrian bomb one, you had said that you only had the video that they had provided in order to reconstruct the room. I wanted to ask what your process looked like when you don't control creation of the room.
Okay, so the question is about the Syria chemical weapons attack and how we did that. So to explain a little bit more about that piece, again, that was done in collaboration with our visual investigations team. They do a lot of video analysis. So that's one of the first few pieces that we collaborated on. And that particular one, the video is from, I think, a Russian network, basically saying what the government wanted them to say and the fact that this was planted there or something like that. I don't remember the specifics, but we used that. There was a lot of really rich video information from that footage. So we used that to create a 3D reconstruction of that scene to be able to disprove that theory. So yes, the videos were used, but not directly as their videos. It was used to facilitate our reporting process and reconstruction.
Okay, let's take one or two more questions, and then we'll go have a cookie. Ma'am?
Obviously, this kind of storytelling involves a lot of time and resources, and there's also a lot of news. So how do you determine which stories to allocate these resources and storytelling towards? Like which stories meet the threshold for storytelling in this way?
I mean, the question again is about news judgment. That's what our desk does in the sense that, again, to back up a little, we operate as we are journalists also. So it's not usual that somebody comes to us saying that this is the graphic we want. Sometimes that happens, but many of the things that you see here, we do our own reporting for it. And so it's like a judgment call whether this is going to be like newsworthy or not. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
Let's take one more. How about all the way in the, well, actually there's two in the back. Get two students. Go ahead, one after the other.
So does your team yourself, does writing part, or do you work with your staff writers to do the writing?
Great question. The question is, does your team do the writing or staff writer? Both. Like some of the stories, our team writes it. Because you might have seen that like the writing part, it's mostly visual. The writing part is very concise. So we've done that. We've collaborated with writers also, if they have like more domain expertise.
Okay. Then the other student, and then this will be the last question.
I was just wondering, you said that obviously this is a very ambitious thing, and I know for the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11, you said that you knew in advance, like, that this was going to be a big thing. Is there ever like a story that comes out and you're like, oh my goodness, I want to do this, and you just don't have the time before you need to get the story out, and you just have to like scrap it or change it drastically?
Oh, all the time.
Can you repeat that?
The question is like, have we felt whether we don't have the time to do something that we really wanted to do? And the answer is all the time. It's like news cycle is so crazy that like people are pulled into different things, and there's always something around the corner that we need to cover. So we have, especially for these longer term pieces, we need to carve out time. That slow news days have been few and far between.
But I guess by practicing on things like the Apollo 11 thing, you're building up skills so that you're better able to respond quickly when breaking news happens.
Yeah. I mean, in the sense that I know I mostly showed like science stuff. We did a lot of politics stuff using new tech as well that we can talk about it later. Yeah.
So one thing that you don't know is that we had a bunch of AV disasters in a talk about AV. We had about an hour's worth of AV disasters, but at the last second, everything came together. That probably happens a lot on news stories. And I'd like to especially thank all the House AV people and then Judd for fixing that. And then so let's go upstairs to the traditions room and have a coffee, have a cookie, and we'll talk.